Good evening, and welcome to this month's virtual Amherst Arts Night Plus. I'm Amy Crawley, chair of Amherst's monthly art walk. Like everyone else during this COVID-19 crisis, we're distressed that businesses, galleries, and museums, and restaurants, so much of our live art and culture is currently unavailable to us. The need for social and physical distancing has kept us from sharing so much that enriches our lives and contributes to our sense of community and identity. This crisis, perhaps more than any other, demands that we not lose touch with what uplifts the human spirit and inspires us. So, Amherst Arts Night is adding yet one more plus to its offerings. This 3-hour virtual presentation from those venues that were able to participate to keep Arts Night Plus on its regular monthly schedule for you to enjoy the creative expression of local artists and performers from wherever you are safely sheltering. We look forward to seeing you again in our galleries in person as soon as it is safe for them to reopen. Thank you for attending and enjoy the program.
So the Social Distance Project is a program that commissions short dance videos, pieces of choreography from dancers, choreographers, and artists all over the world to express their experience of the coronavirus pandemic and the social distancing ordinances that happened thereafter. Well, when the quarantine first began, I was at home alone, and I missed dancing and being creative, and I also missed connecting with people socially. And I realized that a lot of people were going through the same thing. And so I really wanted to give mainly my students a way to stay creative and engage with dance, and also a way for them to connect with their peers. Mm-hmm. I thought that was just so exciting, and I was humbled that so many people took the time to create works for the project. Every student's work was just a sparkling little gem for me to watch. I think people were a little hesitant to create them, but I think in the end they enjoyed it, and that they enjoyed sharing what they had created and seeing what others had choreographed as well. I think it's an essential outlet for human beings all over the world. Everyone needs some sort of outlet, be it creative or athletic or intellectual. And so I think hopefully it served many people in that respect.
Whoso lists to hunt, I know where is a hind. But as for me, alas, I may no more. Who list her hunt, I put him out of doubt, as well as I may spend his time in vain. And graven with diamonds and letters plain, there is written her fair neck round about. Noli me tangere, for Caesar's I am, and wild for to hold, though I seem tame.
sleeping, I dreamed I held you in my arms. When I awoke, dear, I was mistaken. So I hung my head and I cried.
Today I don't feel like doing anything. I just wanna lay in my bed. Don't feel like picking up my phone, leave a message at the tone. 'Cause today I don't feel like doing anything. I just wanna lay in my bed. Don't feel like picking up my phone, leave a message at the tone. 'Cause today I swear I'm not doing anything, nothing at all. Nothing at all. Tell me what you say now. Tell me what you say. Come.
Bright and early for the daily races, going nowhere, going nowhere. And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I ever had. I find it hard to tell you, I find it hard to take. When people run in circles, it's a very, very mad world. it's easier to let you go. Nobody knows what we know about it. No one needs to know. Call me when you made up your mind, but you won't. Caught up in the way that you played my heart. Only love could ever hit this hard. Oh, don't be scared about it. Don't forget it was real. Do you remember the way it made you feel? Do you remember the things it let you feel? When you live to your limit, you gave all you're given. Who you gonna pray to when you're there?
Raindrops are falling on my head, and just like the guy whose feet are too big for his bed, nothing seems to fit. Those raindrops are falling on my head, they keep falling. So I just did me some talking to the sun, and I said I didn't like the way he got things done, sleeping on the job. Those raindrops are falling on my head, they keep falling. But there's one thing I know, the blues they send to meet me won't defeat me. It won't be long till happiness steps up to greet me.
Hello, and welcome to WOW, Women of Words. We are a 2020 writing group of 6 women, members of Gallery A3 in Amherst, Massachusetts. We have been writing 100-word tiny stories about love. Each of us will read our story to you while we post an image for you to enjoy.
When I was dying, my daughter flew north to say goodbye. My child-in-law, my daughter's beloved, said that whenever I heard my daughter's voice, my heart beat faster. And they watched the monitor saying, "Look, she knows it's you." My eyes were closed, like a gray-haired sleeping beauty, but my heart woke up. Months later, I stood on a beach, wobbling on the sand with my new cane, and I watched my daughter and her beloved walk toward the waves. People stared at them holding hands, one deep brown, one pale and burning, and I wondered how to keep them safe when I don't have my land legs, when all I am is a beating heart on the hot sand.
I'm Laura Holland, and my very short story is about a very ugly platter and the different kinds of love that it inspired. So, my mother hung 2 very large ceramic platters on her dining room wall. Even as a child, I knew she loved them, but I found them so ugly. As an adult, I understood how much she wanted me and my brother to cherish them after she died. So when my brother agreed to take them, I was delighted. He took them from Cambridge to New York, to Seattle, and finally to Philadelphia, where they nested inside bubble wrap in boxes for nearly 5 years. Then one day, my brother's husband unpacked a box, unwrapped a platter, and he loved it. He hung it on the wall. When they told me, I was flooded with relief and love.
Hello, I'm Sue Katz, and I'm reading to you my tiny story, Love at First Sight. I didn't believe in love at first sight, but I met Michael on a Wednesday night at a friend's studio on East 9th. He called later to ask for a ride to our Bear Mountain Sunday picnic. We were together from then on. He asked me to marry him 3 weeks later. I said yes, and a few weeks later, I was pregnant. In a few months, we got married, bought a house in Massachusetts, and moved with our 3-month-old daughter. Then in 5 years, we had our son. Best thing I ever did do, believe in love at first sight.
Hello, I'm Nancy Marr, and my 100-word poem is about a day at the beach, and it's titled Love. We spread crusty towels onto the sand, cracked open 2 colas, the puffy bag of triangular-shaped chips. She muscled through the yellow-capped mild salsa. I handed her a paper plate. Storm clouds swooped in like noisy gulls. We dragged everything up to the empty phone booth, sliding open the glass folding door with a screech. How we laughed, dipping the chips into the messy red sauce, swinging back the frosty elixirs like sailors. The wind and rain pelted the window sideways. We wrapped our arms around each other, my sister and I, relishing her day pass.
Hi, my name is Shelley Shikoff, and what I will read is called Somos Novios. I can always go back and back to the generous Mexican bed, rolling summer cloud-filled evening sky, forever blinking electric tower, and Luis Miguel's sultry, terribly romantic tape voice floating up and out through the thrown-open double windows. His voice enters my ears and Alexander's at the same time, though I'm not sure in the same way. This is a private moment. Though we share the same earphones bed, there is no way to know, to exactly know, to be sure of how or what he is feeling. We are very still, together, yet separate.
I'm Janet Winston, and my short story is called Love. Holding this tiny compact bundle, I bury my face into the distinct sweet smell of baby, the skin as soft as a falling blossom. 2 weeks old on a hot summer day, he lies on his side in a loose onesie, room for growth, a delicate, soft cocoon gathering energy through sleep after nursing. 3 months and these eyes twinkle as he looks at me. A sweet smile, arms and feet wave in the air. Can't wait to get going with life. Later, crawling fast, stopping at my feet, his arms go up, and with his eyes and a grin asks to pick me up. I melt.
Thank you so much. We hope you've enjoyed listening to our 100-word reflections on love. We certainly enjoyed preparing them for you. We'd also like to thank Amherst Arts Night Plus, and especially Amy Crawley from Amherst Arts Night Plus, Amherst Media. And we couldn't finish this little event without thanking our member, Marianne Conley, who has been like a beacon for us, navigating the dark, stormy nights of Zoom. And she's been, as well as a beacon, sky full of stars. So thank you so much. We miss you, and we will see you again. Good night.
All right, no pressure. You get one more shot, though. No pressure. Okay, on.
Take an hour out of your short life and come and hang with us, and come and take our bus, and come and take the bus with us, your only friends. Take a shower, be outside in 10, and come and hang with us, and come and take our bus, and come and take the bus with us, your only friends. You hear the world, it's calling, your friends and family fall behind and leave us all to our devices. So you should take an hour out of your short life, come and hang with us, come and take the bus, come and hang with us, your only friends. If only I could be the one to be outside, and then we all could live our lives, then we all could be alright. If we could all just live our lives with us, only friends. You hear the world, it's calling, your friends and family fall behind and leave us all to our devices. So you should take an hour out of your short life, come and hang with us, come and take our bus, come
Hi everyone. Thank you for joining me for this special edition of Wildcrafting with Vincent. I'm Vincent of the Bauer Studio, and if you'd like to see any more of the Wildcrafting with Vincent episodes, check us out on Instagram. We have an IGTV channel. Our Instagram handle is at the Bauer Studio. All right, so today I want to talk to you about a plant that is wonderful for medicine, but it can also be used for crafts. And it's one that is very easy to identify, so it's great for anyone who is new to plant identification or wildcrafting, and it's also great for kids. So this is a wonderful plant that the whole family can be involved in, from the harvesting process all the way to medicine making and crafting. All right, so this plant is mullein. The Latin for it is Verbascum thapsus. Now, mullein is a plant that is non-native, however, it is not considered invasive. Mullein originally came with colonists from Europe, and it has since become naturalized in North America. So this is a plant that you are generally going to be finding in waste areas. It really likes disturbed sites. So it can actually be a little bit tricky to find this plant in an area that you can safely harvest from. Now, if you watch my first video on wildcrafting how-to, that goes into some of the safety information. Now, this plant, part of why it's difficult to harvest is that it likes to grow in a lot of those areas that can be difficult to harvest from safely, like roadsides, waste sites, and areas where there's just a lot of upheaval of the soil. And so that could be old construction sites, old industrial sites, and those are areas that we want to be careful harvesting from, and especially roadsides and along railroads and things like that. So when you're harvesting this plant, you do want to make sure that you're getting it from an area that the soil is relatively clean. You're not having contaminants like lead or other heavy metals in there, and you want to make sure that you're that you know the area that you're harvesting from. So if you are not able to find this plant in an area that you can feel confident about harvesting from, what you can do is harvest the seeds. So as I talk more about this plant, I'll touch on when you can harvest the seeds, and it's also a very easy plant to grow. All right, so how do we identify this plant? So we're going to be looking for it in areas, again, that are going to be disturbed. This could be in natural areas too. It could be like riverbanks that are dry and sandy, very, very quick draining. It doesn't like to have wet feet. It doesn't really like the shade too much. It can tolerate the shade, but the full sun is really when it's happiest. So you're going to be looking for a sunny area. You're going to be looking for soil that is generally pretty dry, quick draining. It can be a bit sandy or rocky, and it's going to be usually surrounded by a lot of other weeds. It's kind of like it restores the soil in a way. So you're going to be finding it in those kinds of areas. Now, in terms of identifying it, it's relatively easy. It doesn't really have anything that looks like it other than maybe lamb's ears. And the reason for that is that lamb's ears is another very, very fuzzy plant, and this is one that's very fuzzy. And I will actually get up closer to show you some of the leaves so that you can see them. So here's what the leaf looks like up close. As you can see, it's pretty fuzzy. It's covered in all of these little hairs, and the younger ones are even fuzzier. Now, like I said, the only other plant that really looks somewhat similar, at least in terms of leaf fuzziness, is going to be lamb's ear. Now, lamb's ear is one that you're pretty much only going to be finding in gardens unless it's maybe escaped a little bit, whereas this one you're going to be finding, like I said, more in the wild, more in waste areas. Now, one of the main differences between this plant and lamb's ears is that lamb's ears has a stem, whereas this one grows as a rosette. So these leaves, they're covered in these fine, fine hairs. They're rather thick on it. Now, if you're finding this plant in the shade, one thing to mention is that it will change its appearance, because the way that it looks is it's adaptations to living in very sunny, dry environments. So all of these hairs on it are there to help protect it from the sun. They're light colored, they're very thick on there, and they help to basically hold moisture into the leaf as well as reflect heat and light from the sun. It also has relatively thick leaves. So if you're finding this in the shade, the leaves are going to be thinner. The leaves are also going to be broader or wider, and they're going to have less hairs because they need to do less work and put less energy into protecting themselves from the sun. So when I harvest this, I generally do harvest them in the full sun because that's the environment that they're happiest in. But I did want to mention that they do change their appearance with the sun, which is true for most plants. Now, another thing about this plant is that it has two appearances depending on where it's at in its life cycle. And this is also something to keep in mind because we are going to be harvesting different parts of the plant at different times of the year and at different parts of its life cycle. Now, this plant is a biennial, so there's annuals, perennials. Annuals are yearly, perennials come back every year, and biennials live for 2 years. Now they will change their appearance depending if they are first year or second year. First year, they're generally going to only be a rosette. They're going to be just leaves. I think this one may actually be a second year because it's getting quite tall. Behind it, there's a smaller one that is definitely a first year because it's quite young as well. Now, it's going to be in a rosette pattern. So a rosette is sort of, if you think of a cabbage, how there's all the leaves are coming from the crown of the plant. Now the crown of the plant is just that area where the roots come out and then the stem starts. So it's that kind of middle area. And so you're not going to be having any visible stem on this plant. So all the leaves are coming from that crown right at the base of the plant and form this beautiful rosette pattern. Now, when the plants are in their second year, they will also have this rosette pattern. However, they will start to send up a stalk. Now, this stalk will have some small leaves on it, but most of the leaves are going to be at the bottom, and the stalk will have the flowers. So it has these beautiful flowers that form in an inflorescence, which is basically kind of like a little bunch of flowers that are at the top. So when we're harvesting this, we do want to pay attention to its age. So first year plants, those are the ones that we're going to be harvesting roots from, and we're also going to be harvesting leaves. Now you can harvest leaves from second year plants too, but first year is when you're going to be harvesting the roots. And again, roots, you're going to get the most out of them if you're harvesting in the fall or in the spring. Now, for the second years, once they put up that inflorescence, you can harvest the flowers. Now I'll get into the medicinal uses and how you'll use these different parts of the plant. So for the roots from those first year plants, the roots are wonderful anti-inflammatory, and they're also antispasmodic. They are toning as well. Now for the roots, you're going to be using it, I generally make a tincture out of it. You can make tea as well, but tincture is a really good way to kind of stretch out the medicine that you're getting from a small amount of plant material potentially. And you're going to chop up that root, make a tincture out of it, and the tincture can be used for dealing with muscle spasms, joint pain, as well as urinary issues. It's especially helpful for back pain where there's spasming, and it's especially helpful for spasming of the urinary muscles. And this could also be where there's a lack of tone of the urinary muscles that leads to incontinence. So this is a plant that's going to help to tone those urinary muscles. It's not going to act as a strong diuretic, and it's also going to help soothe the urinary passages. So that's a really good one for urinary infections as well as incontinence, and it's great for any kind of joint pains, back pains, muscle spasms. Now for the leaves are also a wonderful soothing medicine, but they have more of an affinity for the lungs. Now for the leaves, you can either smoke them or make a tea. You can also make tincture. I prefer to do tea and smoking myself. So for tea, you are just going to take the leaves, chop them up. You can use fresh or dried, and you can make it as a hot tea, especially if you're dealing with any sort of lung congestion, and it helps to basically get all of that gunk out of your lungs. So it acts as an expectorant. It also has some antispasmodic qualities. So if you have those spasming coughs, it helps to soothe that a bit. But it's really good for getting any stuck gunk out of your lungs. It's especially good for dry coughs. And part of that is because this plant contains a lot of mucilage, which is essentially like this slimy, viscous kind of material. And that helps to moisten. So it helps to moisten your lungs. It also helps to moisten the throat, and it has some action too of soothing the digestive system. Now, if you're smoking this herb, so even though it seems counterintuitive to smoke something to soothe the lungs, this is actually an old folk remedy for helping to soothe the lungs, both for colds and for dealing with damage from smoking tobacco. If you're trying to come off of tobacco, you can cut the tobacco with it and slowly wean yourself off of it, using some other herbs in there as well. And you can also add this into your cannabis blends. It helps to basically make the smoke a little bit smoother, and it helps to soothe and moisten. So a lot of the herbs that we're smoking are very, very drying, or they can be, and this can help a bit with that. The other thing that we can do with these is we can use them topically. So for some people, I will mention that the hairs can be a little bit irritating, but this can be used as a nice as a compress. You can also use the leaves as bandages, basically if you're outdoors and you need something in a pinch. And they've also been used in the past to cushion shoes and things like that. So they have some other kind of interesting uses that you can look up and try it out. But do keep in mind that the hairs can be a little bit irritating to some folks. All right, so now that we've gone over some of the medicinal uses for the first year plant, let's talk about the second year. So those flowers, the flowers can be used basically interchangeably with the leaves. However, they are a little bit less irritating in some ways from the leaves in terms of the hairs. You can make a tea out of them, but they're generally used as an ear oil for ear infections, where those flowers are infused into an oil along with garlic, and that can be inserted into the ear to help clean out the ear and also help to fight ear infections. So those are the medicinal uses of this plant. In terms of craft uses, those flowers, again, you can harvest them and you can use them to make a dye. They do make a really nice dye, and depending on what mordant you use, it will change its color. So it'll either be kind of a pale yellow to more of a rich kind of golden brownish ochre color. And that all will depend on what mordants you're using, and you can look up some more information about that. Some of the other things you can do is you can dry these leaves and use them as kindling. You can also try and make wicks out of them. They used to be dried and used to make wicks for oil lamps, so you could give that a shot. Like I said, they've also been used to cushion shoes, and they've been used for cushioning other things like pillows and so forth, bedding somewhat. And the other thing that you can do with them, with that stalk, is let that stalk dry. Now this is where the seeds come in. So after the stalk is dried, this is going to be probably around September, October. September, they usually can be still flowering a bit. So probably around October, you're going to be harvesting the dried stalk. It's going to be brown, and it's going to have all the little seeds in the top of the inflorescence. You can harvest those seeds very easily by just taking the stalk and tapping it over a piece of paper. And the seeds are very, very small, but tap the stalk over the piece of paper, and then you can use that paper to then pour the seeds into a little jar or a envelope that you can save them in. And popping a little silica packet in there will help them last longer too if you don't plan on planting them for a while. So harvest the seeds, and you can plant them in a place that you know that you can harvest from safely. And then you can use that stalk to make what's called a mullein candle or a mullein torch. Now this kind of harkens back to some of the old folklore around this plant of associating it with witches. And so there's some really interesting stories around the mullein torch. So that's something that you could look up. It's also has a secret herb code name associated with witches, where it's called graveyard dust. So do a little looking into that, because that's kind of a fun thing, especially with October and Halloween and all that. But anyway, so back to the candle, what you can do is with that stalk, you can dip it in wax. It's also been dipped in tallow in the past, and occasionally some of the dried leaves are added as a wick. And then you can burn that torch. And so it's a really fun craft activity that you can get the whole family involved, and that can also be a really fun thing that you can do as sort of a Halloween celebration. All right, so those are the craft and medicinal uses of this plant. If you have any questions at all, feel free to send us a message. Again, follow us on Instagram. It's The Bower Studio. You can also send us a message at shop@thebowerstudio.com if you have any questions, and I'd be happy to answer them for you. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I hope that you'll tune in next time.
On a cold winter day in western Massachusetts, this cow takes an interest in her visitor, but has no idea just how lucky she is. She's about to become the only bovine to have her portrait drawn by the artist Avital Segalin, a woman whose paintings often have been declared ahead of her time. Her friends and mentors included Pablo Picasso, Ruben Tam, and Constantine Brancusi. Galleries in New York and Paris in the 1940s and 50s were interested in Avital's work. It was bold, inventive, and daring.
I think Avital's work from the late 40s and the early 50s, when she was only shortly out of Cooper Union, a very young artist in her 20s and early 30s, was on a par with a lot of the very best artists making work both in Paris and in New York at that time.
Hugh Davies was the director of the University of Massachusetts's Fine Arts Center Gallery in the 1970s. He went on to a 33-year-long career as director of the Museum of Contemporary Art, San Diego.
She was breaking new ground in her atmospheric paintings that combine Cubism with lessons learned, as I was saying, from Turner in terms of light, and also from the Impressionists. But it was a kind of abstraction that was always rooted in the real world, so it was more her subjective record of what she was seeing, which incorporated emotion and perception and phenomenology in a way that was very refined and very appealing.
While top galleries were interested in showing her work, Avital declined. She didn't want her art to become affected by rubbing elbows, what was trendy or would sell.
I never wanted to have an exhibit like many of other painters of my time, younger painters, or any painters. Many of them would have an exhibit whether they were ready or not. And I absolutely didn't want to do that because I felt that I don't want to be under any obligation and I don't want to have a deadline when I paint. You know, I want to be, if somebody thinks the painting is beautiful and the agent would say, oh, just leave it like that, I would say, no, I'm not going to leave it because I think it's not good enough. I don't think it's finished.
This is very good.
Okay.
This is very good.
But over the past few years, Avital decided to share her art on her own terms. She worked with her son Dan and his spouse Elaine.
Could you see this being displayed on a wall as opposed to being in a textile as an abstract work of art?
It could.
To create a website highlighting her artworks and her life story, and to establish a presence on social media. Avital sat for multiple interviews in which she talked about her artwork
I think I was still
and creative vision. In the fall of 2019, Avital had her first solo retrospective exhibition at the University Museum of Contemporary Art in Amherst, Massachusetts. This is Avital's story. Born in the mid-1920s, Avital always liked to draw. When she was 3, she was able to identify colors. She grew up in Brussels. When she was 15, Germany invaded Belgium. Her family came to the United States by ship to escape the onslaught. She went to high school in New York City. There, Avital's art teacher recognized her abilities and nominated her to attend the Museum of Modern Art's art classes for talented students. She painted this work, entitled The Horror of War. It depicts Avital's experience fleeing Nazi bombing. It was exhibited at MoMA. Avital studied painting at Cooper Union College. One summer, she rented a fisherman's shack in Provincetown. She drew the wharf and fishing boats. A few years ago, Avital told her son about the trip.
I did this out of the terrace or balcony. It was right on the beach, very close to the water. I could see the wharf, which was illuminated by the sun, which was going down. And at the same time, the moon was coming up. And it's yellow because that's the way I saw everything. It looked yellow, and there was no line of demarcation between the sky and the sea.
The next summer, Avital visited Booth Bay Harbor in Maine to meet fellow artist friends Reuben Tam and Carl Nesjar. While there, she drew massive rocks abutting the sea. On another trip to Maine a few years later, she drew a lobster. Here's what she told her son about that trip.
Well, so of course in Maine people eat lobster because they're fresh and you can get them easily and they're inexpensive. They're very expensive otherwise. So they were going to boil it, and I said, no, I want to draw it first. So I started to draw. And when I finished doing all these sketches, they said, okay, can we have it? We're going to cook it. I said, no, you can't. I'm not going to eat it because now that I know it, I've been working on it, it would be terrible. It would be cannibalism to eat something that was alive and that I knew. And so I got acquainted with. I wasn't going to eat it. I mean, that's savage to do that.
After Avital graduated from Cooper Union, she spent a year creating textile designs.
I had a friend, Ken Scott, who was doing textile designs, and he suggested that I do likewise. So I did, and I opted to do drapery designs because I had studied architecture, and to me that was more interesting than doing flowers. And so I went to see his agent, and she said, well, I can't sell this, you're ahead of your time.
Avital frequently crossed cultural and stylistic boundaries as an artist. In the 1940s, Columbia University art historian and critic Meyer Shapiro met her and followed her evolution as an artist. When she applied for a Fulbright scholarship, Shapiro was one of her references. He said Avital had the potential to become one of the great painters of the 20th century.
Winning a full scholarship to Cooper Union at the time she did in the 40s was a very difficult accomplishment. Very few people had that opportunity. And then being one of the first women to win a Fulbright as a painter, to travel to Europe, to Paris. I mean, these are all extremely difficult hurdles to pass.
During her Fulbright years, Avital moved into a Paris apartment that had been used as a fashion design workshop. Fellow Fulbright scholar Jane Rosenthal was her roommate.
There was one very large room with a number of mannequins, and so Avital used to sit at her easel and paint away in there. And there were mirrors in there too, and Avital was fascinated by this.
Avital also spent a lot of time painting Notre Dame.
When I got to Paris, I was totally intoxicated with the light, which was very different from New York. It was a very soft white light, which made you dream. New York is very energetic. And this wasn't energetic, it was more sort of a spiritual light. I mean, that's the way I saw it. And I like to see Notre Dame because I think it's a very nice structure, very simple. And I painted Notre Dame with the two arms of the Seine hugging it because it's on an island. I painted the rose window at the beginning of the towers, which you see where the stained glass window is. So after a while, I felt that my painting of Notre Dame was too materialistic. It was too much the stone. and I wanted to give the feeling of spirituality. It has actually nothing to do with religion, maybe for some people, not for me, but this is the way I felt. I was very moved being there. I thought it was absolutely beautiful.
Avital had clearly absorbed lessons from studying the art of Turner for light, Cubism from Cézanne and from Picasso. I sensed she'd looked at Braque and others, but she had a very unique take of her own. There are studies of Notre Dame Cathedral where she's not just portraying it as we see it as architecture, but absorbing the complete effect of being in the space around the cathedral, incorporating not only the light, but the sound of the water, of the river, just as she puts it, getting the full effect. And I was very impressed by the fact that she would continue to repaint Notre Dame different times of day, different times of year, different light conditions. As she says, not repeating herself, but re-imaging it until she captured its essence. And I think in some of those paintings, on multiple occasions, she captured the essence, which only a great painter can do.
Through a mutual artist friend, Manolo Angelis Ortiz, Avital met Pablo Picasso in Paris and visited him at his studio and later at his ceramics workshop in Valoris in southern France.
Manolo was always telling me, I'd like you to be Picasso. And I said, well, I don't want to, because very frankly, I don't want to be one of those people who are, trying to see somebody well known. I said, I can have his message through his work. So one day we went to Picasso's gallery, and then we walked into the gallery, and who do we see? We see Picasso there. And Picasso came with his arms outstretched, like this, and he hugged me and he said, Avital, I wanted to meet you. And I started to tremble because, here I am in the arms of Picasso. And he said, oh, you have to come to my studio, Quai des Grands Augustins, that's a quay near the Seine, and come to Valoris. I said, thank you very much, thank you. And that was it. So one day, Manolo called me, and I was staying in a small hotel, and he called and he said, I'm going to see Picasso this morning, and I want you to come. And I said, no, I already told you. I don't want to be a nuisance to him. So he said, but you're not the only one. I have two other people I'm bringing who've been begging me to introduce them. So I said, well, if they're okay, so I'll go. So we went upstairs, and we went into a room which was, it was like a little living room, but it was, to me, it felt like being at the dentist waiting in a waiting room, and I felt very ill at ease. And then the door opened, two doors. Who do I see? Picasso. Then again he hugged me and said, oh, it's so nice to see you. And I said, where's your work? I said, I didn't bring it.
This was not the first time that Avital would shun opportunities to show her work to those who had the power to launch her career. A number of major galleries were interested in exhibiting Avital's work, but she declined. But many of Avital's artist friends, like William de Kooning, Ruben Tam, and Carl Nesjar, went on to become world-renowned. Avital says there were certain aspects of the art world she did not like.
I wanted to be totally free of any influence, any flirting with critics, which many women did, and I didn't like that at all. Or people who owned galleries.
In the 1950s, she went to the MacDowell colony and became friends with Jacob Avshalomov, who gave her sheet music paper to draw on. During that fellowship, she also drew a series of jugs.
Her work from that time is is extremely advanced. It's very much on the cutting edge of art in not just in Europe, but anywhere in the world at that time. Extremely accomplished artist, and as a young artist, great potential and sort of wise beyond her years in terms of her achievement as a painter.
This is the drawing that Avital made of me.
Jane Rosenthal remembers that Avital was interested more in simply painting than getting her work shown in the Paris art scene.
She could sit all day in front of that canvas and paint away and that sort of thing. I never got the impression that she was trying to get galleries to take her work. She never talked to me at all about trying to push her work out at all.
She was on first-name basis with a number of the most important artists of the 40s and 50s, but she was very reluctant to show her work. She felt that the obligation to make work for a date for an exhibition would impinge on her natural creativity or the natural evolution of her work. But it's a great shame that someone didn't twist her arm to get her to exhibit her work earlier, because it would have been a very encouraging experience for her, and most importantly, her work would be far better known than it is today.
Avital began teaching art at MoMA in New York City after her Fulbright. She got married in the mid-1950s. She started a family. They moved to Western Massachusetts. She often visited the family farm in the Berkshires and painted. In the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, and after the year 2000, she often painted while on or after returning from trips overseas. She painted St. Marco's Cathedral in Venice, the L'Église de la Madeleine in Verneuil-sur-Avre, France, the Piazza del Campo in Siena, Italy, the Leather Tannery in Fez, Morocco.
It's Cubist, actually, put Cubist.
In 2017, Avital agreed to work with her son to build a website with the objective of eventually exhibiting. In the fall of 2019, the University Museum of Contemporary Art at UMass in Amherst hosted a major solo retrospective exhibition. It featured her work mostly from the 1940s and 1950s.
Well, Avital Sagalan is an unrecognized talent throughout her career, and she's been working silently, quietly, under the radar, producing an extraordinary body of work. And I have to say, I think that she's been a hidden treasure in our community.
Loretta Yarlow is the University of Massachusetts' museum director.
I think what impressed me was the fact that she has kept her own path, this incredible, distinctive style that she's kept, her own vocabulary. She's been an independent, and I think that's what attracted me to a woman of her stature, her importance, how she's maintained her independence.
Many of the works of art exhibited, like these drawings of Gourd, a medieval village on a mountaintop in France, and these Cubist tables, had never been seen before, even by Avital's family. Many of her most powerful works were hidden treasures, which Avital simply had stowed away and never discussed.
Her mediums have been, the wide range of mediums that she's worked in has been really breathtaking. To think that there are paintings, drawings, prints, works on paper, sculpture, and her textile designs.
Hugh Davies said if he had seen Avital's work during the 1970s, he would have offered her an exhibition 50 years earlier.
One of the things that nags at me is, had I been in a position to show her work in the 70s, would that have encouraged her to make more art and to get back in the studio? And that haunts me, that, you know, this is an individual of extraordinary talent who walked away from her studio when she should have been pursuing her vision and growing and evolving in a way that that lived up to her extraordinary early promise and accomplishment.
Avital's work and life story now can be seen on her website, avitalsagalan.com.